I have the right to say that I was done dirty in the edit if it comes to court.
Welcome to A Century in Cinema. I'm Arthur.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is a podcast where we discuss a classic film from every year. Today's film is from 1947, Black Narcissus, directed by Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger. Black Narcissus is available on the Criterion channel. You can always check our show notes to find where it is streaming these days. I guess this is part one of two of a Powell and Pressburger deep dive. We have two films from them in a row, Black Narcissus and next week, The Red Shoes from 1948.
I also want to just be completely upfront right off the bat. These are two of my favorite films, so I will be going hard for them.
I told Andrew before we started recording that I enjoyed one and I didn't quite enjoy another.
But we're going to get further into that. I'm not sure what his hot take is going to be just yet. Or if it's even going to be that hot of a take. You know, it could just make complete sense and I'm too passionate.
I'm also no critic. Who cares what I think?
But before we get to all of that, Arthur, what's going on in 1947?
I feel like one of those news of the world announcers, right? Just going through everything real quick.
I love it. I'm the person eating popcorn in the third row talking to my boyfriend while I'm waiting for it to be over. No, I'm just kidding.
Just waiting for the real movie to begin.
Yeah, I'm like, man, these are getting longer. I'm just kidding. No, I actually thoroughly enjoy them. And also, just a little anecdote. I love listening to these episodes, truly. And whenever I listen to them, there's always something in the history lesson that for some reason or another I didn't catch on the recording. Kid you not, every single episode there's a moment where I go, oh, wow, that happened that year. Like, I don't know, it always gets more contextualized when I'm listening than when I'm recording. So I don't know what that means, but just thought I'd say it.
1947. Okay. So this is the year the Cold War truly begins. Obviously not a true war, but more like a big stressful threat of war between the Soviet Union and its allies and the United States and its allies. President Truman lays out the Truman Doctrine, where he promises the U.S. will help support democratic nations and resist communist or authoritarian movements, like what was happening in Greece and Turkey, actually, around this time. So, yeah, this really marks the beginning of the Cold War. Other big geopolitical events going on. India and Pakistan gain independence from Britain. The UN votes in favor of creating an independent Jewish state with Israel. And the CIA is established. All non-controversial topics that we will never revisit, I'm sure.
I was just thinking, I was like, man, that is loaded right there. And then you peeked it all off with the CIA, and it just all feels like full conspiracy, like it's all a plan, it's all brewing.
Well, as long as we're talking about conspiracies, this is also the year of the Roswell UFO crash. There you go.
Wow.
Jackie Robinson becomes the first African American to play in Major League Baseball, and there's black and white Polaroid cameras that can develop photos in about 60 seconds, developed this year. So, all fun stuff. In October of this year, 1947, HUAC, the House of Un-American Activities Committee in Congress, officially begins to investigate people in Hollywood for their alleged involvement with communists. So the film industry does not escape this growing sense of unease, this Red Scare. And this will become a big issue. Careers are ruined, grudges are held, even to today, as I understand. What kind of films do we have coming out in 1947? Let's see what we got now. Miracle on 34th Street.
Now, what's that? Actually, I don't even know if that joke will land, because it's like, I'm really familiar with that movie, but I don't know if it's still popular with the kids today.
I don't think the kids are watching it, but I still am. Great Christmas movie.
You know, I always preferred the remake with Mara Wilson when I was younger, but I actually haven't seen either of them in a very long time, so... This is the year Kurosawa wins over the hearts of the public with One Wonderful Sunday. And I've seen One Wonderful Sunday. It's a very sweet film. Bergman is also on the move. A Ship to India is released this year, which many would consider one of his weaker films, and I would probably agree, but there is a lot of melodrama and a lot of really great shadow work in that movie, and it's all building to his eventual breakthrough as one of the great international directors. So those two are slowly bubbling up, and Carol Reed's Odd Man Out comes out this year, which is a really great British film, and its wide acclaim and dark tones and shocking ending would end up garnering him a sort of blank check film in which he got to make The Third Man, which will be our film we discuss in 1950.
1949, actually.
1949. Yeah. Fix it in post. No, leave it in.
Speaking of Orson Welles, Lady from Shanghai is this year.
I've never seen that.
Oh, no?
Mm-mm.
Great film noir.
But Black Narcissus is a film about a group of nuns who are called to work on the top of a very large mountain somewhere in the Himalayas, and as they serve up on top of this mountain, things start to go horribly awry as they realize the landscape, the people who live there, and in general, the culture shock from their comfy nunnery in Britain to this presents much more of a challenge than they were expecting. It has a very huge, infamous genre shift in the third act, which is one of the reasons this film is studied and respected today. And it has a bleak ending of the nuns being forced to return and give up the convent they tried to establish, as nature and the civilization that was already there wins supreme.
No mention of Mr. Dean, my favorite character.
Oh, he's so hot, too.
You can see why the nuns give up their life of servitude to God for Mr. Dean.
Do they? just one.
The lead sister's pretty close, I feel.
Sister Claudia. No, I think that she is... Well, okay, now we're getting into it. I think that Sister Clodagh is having memories and is reminiscing, and there's this part of her that does desire him, but I don't think she ever comes close to actually giving up her faith for him or doing anything with him that is uncouth. She just all of a sudden is left with pretty much no one because all of her sisters have sort of lost their minds, and he's the only one with any sense.
Yes. Nothing like Sister Ruth.
Yeah, Sister Ruth goes hardcore. What did you think of this movie?
So I really liked this movie.
Oh, my heart. My freaking heart. Okay, yeah, continue, though.
All right. No, I love the setting of this film, and I love what it has to say about these people who try to dominate another culture and end up just being rejected by the people of this land. I liked that aspect of it. The, I don't know, anti-imperialist sort of.
I was going to say, didn't you mention that this is the year India is no longer under British colonialism?
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
You can kind of tie those together. I didn't even realize that until I was looking up all the history that.
So it's not like technically India, but it is India. It's like they try and get away with this weird, like it's sort of this almost mythical mountain.
Yeah, it's like this Shangri-La sort of place.
Yeah, but it's totally India. That's definitely what they're trying to emulate.
Yeah, I found that whole aspect of it really fascinating. I think the film has a really good sense of humor, actually. Like, I thought a lot of it was really funny. The heightened sort of melodrama of it, as long as you're not taking it too seriously, I don't know, you can have a lot of fun with what's going on.
I'll go ahead and just say how I came across both of these films. The first Criterion I ever bought, Roman Polanski's Repulsion. I was so impressed by the presentation that I looked up Criterion, and they had just released this, The Red Shoes on Blu-ray. And I was so into Black Swan at this point in time that when it said it was the best dance movie ever, I just had to see if it was true. So I went and bought it, watched it, loved it, was like, what else have these guys done? Found out Black Narcissus was also in the Criterion Collection, had also been recently released on Blu-ray. And I mean, I was just gobsmacked by this film. I had no idea what to expect going in. Every single new scene had an image that made my jaw drop, or a performance that tugged at my heartstrings, and the matte paintings and everything. I mean, it just all swept me up. I was so enamored with it my first time watching it. And I felt similarly on this rewatch as well, truly.
Yeah, I guess I got so swept up in the story, the characters, and the themes behind this film that I totally forgot to mention the technical aspects of it are incredible.
Yes.
Basically, this entire film was shot on a soundstage. Mm-hmm. Like, you kind of know it in the back of your head, but really, that's incredible.
Seeing pictures of behind the scenes of what some shots look like before the matte paintings were added, it blows my mind to look at it because I mean, it's literally concrete blocks and like sidewalks and buildings and stuff just right on the flat ground behind them, where eventually there will be a vast mountainscape. And it blows my mind that these guys were able to shoot this and be like, oh yeah, that's the right angle. It's going to work to make this effect happen once we add in this painting that hasn't even been completed yet. It's not like they're in a stage with paintings behind them or there. All of the paintings are added in post to create depth, and so they can add more effects over them. And so there's no way they could possibly know exactly what the image was going to look like while they were shooting, but they just knock it out of the park. You can tell that it's not on location, but the whole aesthetic is so consistent and so captivating and beautiful that you just kind of don't care. You just fall into it.
I mean, the film won an Academy Award for Best Art Direction, and it's well-deserved.
Yeah.
Alfred Junge, German-born production designer, and I think he was working at UFA before this.
UFA, they come back.
Yeah, obviously Studio UFA, huge in the silent era behind films like Metropolis, and the production designer for this, Alfred Junge, coming from that background. Yeah, it's incredible, really, to see the development of art direction and production design, visual effects that cinema's gone through in just a little bit over a decade. You know, like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That films have come this far so quickly.
Absolutely.
So Powell and Pressburger, before starting this project and getting to the 40s, I hadn't even heard of these two, but you seem to really like them. So why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger, known as the Archers. I know that at this point they've already done The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Also stars Deborah Kerr. She plays like 4 different characters through time. And they made A Canterbury Tale, I Know Where I'm Going, and A Matter of Life and Death. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this was their 5th film where they were directing together. They're really well known for their visual effects and their impeccable aesthetic. And I really feel like this one feels like a culmination of a lot of experience and a lot of time. And it's also their first post-war film. And yeah, I just think it's amazing. They made war films during the war. And their first post-war film is this rebellion against British colonialism that is based on a book that Michael Powell really enjoyed. But yeah, they're very famous British directors.
And it feels like they're famous because of their work in color. We've remarked upon how none of the films that we've been watching have been in color, right? Just Robin Hood.
Yes.
It's actually pretty rare for a film to be shot in Technicolor for all the reasons that we went into in that episode. It's just incredibly expensive, technically difficult. You have to be really, really good at what you're doing in order to shoot it well. It speaks to their mastery of the medium that they keep shooting things in color, and they're doing it incredibly well.
When I'm watching these, I'm imagining like this is kind of the only film I've seen from this year, even though it isn't true. I'm sort of like pretending that I'm on this time travel journey, and to go from Robin Hood to this, it feels just like, I don't know, like some sort of magnanimous earthquake occurred that just shocked everybody into figuring out what to do. Because I liked Robin Hood a lot, but the way it was shot was a little pedestrian. A lot of medium shots. There were some cool effects, but as far as the actual angle of the camera, it didn't venture out too much. And then you have this film with its sweeping cameras and zooms and its really expressive angles from above, and it is creating this atmosphere just with the movement of the camera, and you're like, oh, well, they figured it out. It's just astounding to watch, honestly.
It has been almost a decade since Robin Hood, so it makes sense that filmmakers would be figuring it out. But even then, the cameras are still huge. It still requires a ton of planning and craftsmanship to make a Technicolor film look this good. My main thought was just how much more mature it felt. And I mean, that's not fair to compare Robin Hood to this, but Robin Hood, it felt like there was this excitement to show off as many colors as possible and just fill the screen with all these different expressive, vibrant looks. And this one, a lot of the cast is dressed in white, but the contrast with the nuns in their, what's the word I'm looking for? Their sort of drained costumes versus the really vibrant looks of the local population and Mr. Dean and the flowers on the trees and everything. They're clearly not supposed to be here, right? So I love that
and
the
all
color,
the paintings on the walls.
Yeah, and then that's also beautiful too. So the color really plays into the themes of the film as well and what the movie story is trying to say. Like, this movie wouldn't have nearly the same sort of effect if it was black and white, even though the colors aren't in your face like they were with Robin Hood or something like Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. They start with the aesthetic. There's no doubt about it. Their production design and pre-production meetings were notoriously very dense and long, but they always come through with some sort of message and theme that you would just not expect, especially from films of this time period. And I think that's really what's given them the lasting power.
Yeah. I mean, why are we doing 2 episodes on them versus other great filmmakers? Just a coincidence, really. Like, other filmmakers like Orson Welles might even deserve 2 episodes. But I haven't seen any of their films, and I'm excited actually to watch more because I really enjoy Black Narcissus.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to do these 2 back to back. I really, when we were reevaluating the decade, I really fought for it. And it does sort of fold into my sort of recurring narrative of saying these directors are getting lost to time, but I just don't see these 2 discussed in the same caliber as Orson Welles or anyone, you know, who's super fan, Kurosawa or Bergman, who was coming up in that time. And I really wanted to do a major focus on these 2 films that are considered by most to be their masterpieces. And yeah, I was really excited to do these 2 episodes in a row, because if I was going to dedicate 2 episodes in a row to anyone, it would be them, because I love their movies.
And really, there are 2 of them in the duo, so
yeah.
Director Michael Powell apparently loved to shoot on location. And this film, as we mentioned, is shot entirely in a studio.
Why do you think that was? Do you think it had to do with the war?
Honestly, when you're shooting, are you going to go to India to film this?
I was just about to say, maybe lugging big cameras up to the top of a mountain is just kind of impossible.
I know that filmmakers choose to situate themselves in sound stages because of the convenience and the control. I mean, that should go without saying. And watching these 2 directors, it feels like them and their entire team need an enormous amount of control in order to achieve what they're trying to do. When you mentioned in these notes that Director Powell, liked to shoot on location, I can't imagine him shooting a film like the two that I just saw on location. I don't know if there are any negatives to shooting this on a soundstage, because I think that it still looks amazing and there's a certain level of heightened cinematic animation to it, I guess. Like, it doesn't feel real, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked a little bit about those behind the camera and the directors. What about the cast in this film?
So, Sister Ruth, for me, inarguably the best performance in the film, played by Kathleen Byron. She's not even a very famous actress. What's really funny is that if you look her up on IMDb, her profile picture is just a straight up screen grab from Black Narcissus, because that's the only movie anyone knows her from. But she was the first one they had cast. I believe they saw her in a stage production and saw the innocence in her face and how she was able to turn it menacing and thought she would just be perfect. And they were correct.
Yes.
And then
yes.
Deborah Kerr, they thought she was too young. Well, Michael Powell thought she was too young, and Pressburger was really gunning for it. And in the end, Powell was extremely impressed with her performance and was very happy. And they had worked together before on Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. But she was really able to prove herself to them with this role, because they were nervous she wouldn't be able to bring the weatheredness and sort of the feeling like she's being worn down. They were scared she wouldn't be able to bring that with her face being so youthful. But I really think she does such a great job. And you mix her ability to perform that with her youthful face, it really gives you this full idea that she is just in way over her head. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it's just a great performance from her as well. I think they both knock it out of the park. It's so entertaining to watch them. And the scenes where they're working off of each other are my favorite in the film.
Yeah, and then let's not forget David Farrar as Mr. Dean. Honestly, felt like a proto-James Bond with his attitude.
Yeah.
And everything. I thought he reminded me of Timothy Dalton, actually, quite a bit.
Yeah. And Sabu was a very famous Indian actor at the time. I actually have a nostalgic connection to him. My parents used to have this VHS of a old school Jungle Book film, and he played Mowgli in it. And I used to love it when I was a kid. But he's cast in this film as the young general, and he gives a really great performance as well, even though he doesn't get as much screen time.
Yeah, but I love him. He was great.
Yeah, both the men in this are very attractive, him and David Farrar, which is never a downside for me.
I also understand that it was hard to cast young men during this time for obvious reasons.
Right, because while it was filming, the war was still going on. Well, it was waning down, but...
And that's why you have... Well, it's not the only reason you have, but it makes it easier to film a movie with a cast of mostly women, right?
Right. From the research I've done on this film, pretty much Michael Powell has stated that he would have loved to have cast Indian actresses and actors for all of the main speaking roles, but it was because they were on a studio. It was pretty much impossible to do like that sort of a casting call in the way that he would have if it was a location. And I hate the brown face in this film so much, and we're just going to dive right into it here, because for me, it is the only thing that dates this movie. It is the only aspect of this film that keeps it from becoming like the full-on seminal classic that I want it to be, because it just has aged so horribly. Gene Simmons at least gets to barely say a word in the film. The worst victim of this, outside of the Indian people themselves, of course, is May Hallett playing Aya, who is an Indian woman with a Cockney accent who who maintains but doesn't maintain. When they introduce her, they're like, oh, she'll help you maintain, and she's like, oh, she does the cleaning, and it's like, oh, she doesn't do any cleaning, but you'll find her useful. And it's like, okay, well, what is she doing here? So her character makes no sense. And then I don't know what I just don't get what the direction was for, it's an Indian woman and we're gonna have you do brown face and make you look crazy, but you're still gonna have a Cockney British accent. I know this isn't like traditional, but it's a movie, it's fiction. Why not just keep her as like a Cockney British woman and have her be someone who's either living up there or someone who comes with the nuns because she's someone who can help them clean? I don't know. Come up with a plot reason. I'm on a soapbox. I find those performances offensive, and the worst one is Esmond Knight as the old general. He's only on screen for 2 minutes, but man, he is the one with like dialogue, and he has been told to put on a full-on Indian accent, and it makes me cringe every time because it's not even like an authentic Indian accent. It is a total parody of what British people would think an Indian accent was, which is crazy because at this point their cultures have already crossed. So I find it so frustrating that I have to talk about it at length here because it has to be mentioned, first of all. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to send anyone into this movie without some sort of knowledge, unless, of course, it's Arthur, who I didn't tell that at all to. And I just... He says the main reason that he did that was because they were shooting on a studio and it was easier to get actors who were already on the lot. Because Gene Simmons was doing 2 films simultaneously, this one and another one. So that's the only negative to filming on a studio, but it's the biggest negative of the whole movie. So maybe it didn't have anything to do with the studio, and Michael Powell just says that.
I was going to say, I kind of don't believe.
But if that's his excuse, then this is where I'm going to complain about it. You know what I mean?
All right. Yeah.
So, yep, that's my rant. Feel free to pitch in on that if you want to.
No, I think you basically covered it. I guess I didn't even, I barely noticed it. I know that's terrible.
You were captivated. And I will be honest, my first time watching it, I didn't know it was there at all. And I always thought Aya was a very strange character, but I was like, okay, this whole thing's like a weird, macabre, horror, fantasy world, so she can just exist. But now I've seen this film, I mean, we're talking dozens of times, and every time you watch it, it gets just a little bit more painful. So I think that's why I'm coming at it from this angle.
Yeah, no, I'm sure I'll be bothered by that the next time I watch it quite a bit.
Sorry about it. But, you know, and all that to say, it does bother me, but it's not a film I can't revisit. It's a film that I mean, there's so much I love about the movie. You know, it's like... It has to have something that dates it. It can't just be this perfect film from the 40s. It couldn't be literally the Citizen Kane of Technicolor films. It had to have something that was going completely against it. So
the film itself doesn't feel like it has racist sentiments.
No.
As compared to something like Gone with the Wind or, good Lord, The Birth of a Nation, which are terrible.
Mr. Dean and the nuns occasionally have these conversations where he refers to them as savages, as like brutal people and stuff, and it's horrible, but their perspective is skewed and the film is not completely on their side, because the film is showing you the people who are living there not only are living there but are thriving there. There is sentiment reflecting that, but only in a way of keeping things realistic about how these British citizens would look upon these people at the time, because they are completely wrong, and they are the ones who are unable to acclimate.
Now is as good a time as any to transition, talk about the review from the time period.
Did you see how I ordered those notes? Because I knew. I was like, I'm going to rant, and then we just need something to just jump into immediately. Okay, let me read this. National Legion of Decency. Oh, God. What have you found? This is not fun for me. Okay. Oh, no. Where did you find this?
It's just linked on Wikipedia.
Oh, wow.
This is a brief comment from the National Legion of Decency, which has placed Black Narcissus in the condemned classification.
I'm crying.
And the actual
I'm
quote,
literally crying.
the reason for this. The character of this film and the attitudes displayed therein create an impression that constitutes an affront to religion and religious life. It ignores the spiritual motivation, which is the foundation and safeguard of religious life, and it offensively tends to characterize such life as an escape for the abnormal, the neurotic, and the frustrated. What does that mean?
I don't know. Is this movie anti-religious? Maybe. Man, I'm too far removed from religion at this point in life to have an opinion. I don't feel like this movie is anti-religious. This is a hysterical review. I literally cried from laughing reading this. This is such a good time capsule of this frightened, modernist, overly, pretty much hypocritically modest society where they're like, oh, it shows religious people in a slightly unflattering light that doesn't even link in any way directly to their actual religion. It's just because they're a bunch of white women who try to live on the top of a mountain in India and are completely unprepared. So it's not because they're Christians or Catholic or I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody.
No, I don't think this film is anti-religious, but it didn't make me want to become religious.
Okay. I feel like it's more of a this has completely confounded me. I have no idea what to make of this quote-unquote review.
Yeah, this is not a review that I've dug up.
There really isn't much of a critique.
I just thought it was hilarious.
Pretty much, they just didn't get it. And they got really angry because not only did they not get it, but it was talking about religion in a way that made them uncomfortable. We've discussed the National League of Decency as well. We discussed them during Babyface, because they used to be the Catholic League or whatever. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So they're still at it. On the Wikipedia, there isn't an immediate link to disbandment, so I'm already upset. In 2005, there were controversies around these people. Oh, man.
Really, like, stick-in-the-mud religious groups have never had great taste in films.
And yeah, they want us to watch Fireproof. You don't even know what that is.
I don't.
That was a remnant of my Southern Baptist upbringing. It was a Christian movie that came out that was like a blockbuster in the Bible Belt. It
oh, of course,
actually cracked the top 10 of box office in a way that no one was expecting. It was a horrible movie. Just one of the worst movies I've ever sat through.
Well, Black Narcissus was a successful film, so even though the Legion of Decency and probably the Hays Code, I don't know for sure, weren't like on board with this film, I do think that it shows the influence of those organizations slipping because this is a great success. I do feel like films are pushing more boundaries than they did at the very beginning of the Hays Code era. But I have nothing to back that up. That's just an impression I'm getting as I'm watching more movies and time is going on.
I like that impression.
Again, I do think it's so interesting, its place in the time period. Just the fact that a couple months after this film comes out, India gains independence from Britain. I do think that there is a... filmmakers are tapping into the zeitgeist of the moment, that Britain is coming to terms with the fact that it is no longer an imperial power in the world. It's losing control of all these colonies, doesn't have the same kind of influence after the war. And because of the war, really, it's not shown as a bad thing. It's not shown as this, like there is a more respect for the cultures and the people in these far distant lands to the British people. Than I would have expected.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, the film is pretty much saying we have no business being there. We should not be going into there. And it's interesting because it isn't even from a 100% colonial perspective. You know, the whole thing is an allegory with these nuns who, through colonialism, are able to make this move. Mr. Dean is kind of the actual representation of colonialism, and he's a drunk braggart who is completely unaware of his effect on the situations around him and is unable to understand the consequences of his own actions. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
Mm.
So, yeah, I like this film a lot with the way it handles the racial side of its story, because it would be so easy to make this film about white people being racist towards Indian people, but instead it's all about the nuns who are trying to acclimate to this culture, having to learn that a part of that acclimation is the English colonialism himself, Mr. Dean, and he is sort of what tears everybody apart. And I think that's such a mature and nuanced way to talk about it. It's saying this isn't just bad for the Indian people who the modern British citizen might not have any emotions toward. This is bad for everybody. This is bad for all of our society. And I think that's incredible. This movie is saying that in the freaking 40s.
It's great that it's saying that in the 40s, but I still struggle to see that in films today, honestly.
Yeah. It's a Russian villain or a Middle Eastern villain or an alien. We talk about the religion, we talk about the race. How do you feel like this film tackles gender? And this is important because we're going to be discussing this way more in depth for the Red Shoes.
I mean, I like that it's a film that has real female characters, feel like real people going through things that aren't just...
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating that all of these women are struggling in different ways. And on a cursory viewing, you might think that Sister Clodagh and Sister Ruth are both being sort of tempted because everyone's dealing with their own demons. And it can almost feel like they're both being tempted by this man. But truly, Sister Clodagh is, when she asks the Mother Superior if she's upset with her being chosen as the leader of this new group, and the woman says that she's upset because she thinks that she's going to get too lonely and that she won't be able to control these women. So really, she's kind of having this internal conflict of feeling unworthy and feeling like she has to compensate for her lack of experience and youth. And I think that's so interesting. And I love her character's arc. I love that I don't even want to say love. I don't think she's in love with him. But her affection towards Mr. Dean and her occasional weakness, it isn't because he's Mr. Dean and they're having some whirlwind romance or something. It's because he reminds her of the time before she became a nun. And for the first time in her life, since she joined the convent, she is all of a sudden being flooded with these memories of what her life was like before she was a nun. So he's more of a representation to her of the life she could have had. And she's getting so whirled up in whether she's made the right decisions in life because of her insecurity towards being a leader. It makes her a very compelling character arc. Then, of course, Sister Ruth is the one who is actually tempted by Mr. Dean. She sees him as just the most beautiful man she's ever seen. She clearly has emotional dependence issues. She needs to be needed. When she almost kills the woman in the doctor unit by not calling anyone because she wants to solve it herself, it's because she wants to feel like she is contributing in a way that she is unprepared to do. Sister Honey is, of course, weakened by her compassion, and she makes a fatal mistake of giving medicine to a baby that has no chance of surviving, and therefore people think the medicine is what killed the baby, which is what really starts to tear everyone apart, even though she's the nicest one there, and she's kind of the emotional anchor for them all because she's the only one who can have any sort of positive outlook. The final one to really discuss is Sister Philippa, who messes up the gardening and is so transported by the culture itself and wishes to sort of be able to assimilate further with the culture being presented to her, as opposed to bringing their culture in. But yeah, that's just like a brief, not so brief, I guess, but just that's just an overview of these different women and how they're all very central to this film. And I love that they all have their own struggles. None of their struggles feel like it's inherently because they're a woman. It doesn't ever feel like they're weak because they're women. It feels like they're weak because they are these people who have been thrust into a world that they are unprepared to survive in. And I like that the man exists as nothing more than plot dressing for the women's conflicts. I mean, truly, he doesn't do too much for the story. Mm-hmm. When the big finale comes and it's time for someone to save the day, he's nowhere to be found. He isn't even there. Sister Clouda throws Sister Ruth off the side of that building herself. Which, she doesn't actually throw her.
It's a Disney death. They slip and fall to their doom.
The first time I watched this movie, this shot stuck out to me, and it's still, every time I watch it, even this time watching it, I was like, oh my God, when Sister Ruth comes through the doorway to see Sister Clodagh at the bell, and the choir is singing, and the light is complete darkness behind her, and her hair is in the wind. It's just like you said, it's like this manic Disney villain moment. And it's so it's so campy, but it's so, the movie has played it so straight after that point that level of camp doesn't come across as cheesy or forced. It feels like the stakes have just been raised so high. Yeah, there you go. I don't know what I just said, but I said something. When I watch this movie, there is this part of me that's terrified, mainly because of the brown face, that it will just become a complete relic. But I do think modern audiences can appreciate this film. And I love that Martin Scorsese so unabashedly calls this one of his favorite movies and talks about it at length all the time. That really is, it just makes me feel great. Wow, I feel like I went on 3 different rants.
I'm looking at my audio over here. I've said nothing for the past 20 minutes.
Shut up, that's not true.
No, that's not true at all. I have a quick question for you. I know they mention it in the middle of the film. Black Narcissus is the name of a scent on the
young general.
Yeah, the general's handkerchief fabric.
Yeah.
What is that? What does that mean for the whole film? What's the meaning of the title?
That's a good question. I think the film is called Black Narcissus because not only is it that scent, but it's the scent of this flower. And when he brings it up to Sister Ruth, she thinks it's complete nonsense and doesn't care at all about what he's talking about. Because it's also meant to be a scent that attracts women. He's wearing it so he can win Conchi's affection. And I think the title is supposed to emulate that it's, these nuns in this world where this flower exists that's kind of an aphrodisiac, and how they're all trying to fight against it. Yeah, I love this movie, and I love showing it to people too because it always grips them. Everyone. I've never had anyone have a bad experience watching this movie, and whenever that third act happens, I just love seeing people be shocked by it.
Yeah, that hard turn into a horror movie that it sort of becomes.
And actually, very few films I can say this about, but I actually showed it to my parents, and they loved it, and they're very religious people, so screw you, League of Decency. Yeah.
Let's talk about part 2 in our Powell Pressburger duology.
Yeah, we've already kind of mentioned it, but we're talking about both Black Narcissus and the Red Shoes tonight. You guys will not be able to hear Red Shoes until next week, but we sort of did this as a little double feature.
The Red Shoes is also available on the Criterion channel, but as usual, you can check our show notes to find anywhere else it might be streaming these days. Cool.
Cool.
I just want to give a shout out to all our Patreon members who keep the show running. Thank you all. You too can become a patron and get access to bonus episodes linked down in the show notes. You're listening on YouTube now, so like and subscribe and comment down below. Tell us if you've seen the film. What did you think of it? Did we miss anything? Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next one.